Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to our presentation. My name is TJ Laws-Nicola.
And my name is Brent Ferguson. Today we will be talking about Japanese idols, the 2014 video game Omega Quintet, and the fusion of hypermarket capitalism and weaponization that occurs within this game. Weaponization of music in games is far from a new concept, especially in role-playing games. The Bard class in Dungeons & Dragons weaponize song in battle, and RPG video games continue this trope. William Cheng discusses the weaponization of music in the social sphere as it relates to The Lord of the Rings Online in his monograph Soundplay. Tim Summers also describes the weaponization of the 8 melodies in Mother in his chapter in the edited collection Heroes and Harmonies.
We also look to bell hooks' feminist theory, as it gives additional dimension to the feminist issues presented in Omega Quintet and help to verbalize our conclusions. We also examined the works of Kaya Silverman and Miyadi Shinji, just to name a few. The rest of the scholars will be mentioned in more depth in the conclusions section. However, our main source material for the explanation of idols and their framework was in the edited collection Idols and Celebrity in the Japanese Media Culture. In this text, contributors ruminate on the concept of idols and their myriad roles in Japanese culture, with topics ranging from idol as celebrity to idols as commodity. This work discusses Japan's history with the modern idol and its repercussions on their economy and way of life.
While Galbraith and Carlin define idols in terms of their use in the Japanese mediascape, the term idol is probably better known as a performer of various talents that reaches a wide audience and is therefore present in most media while representing their brand. There are a variety of idols, each with their own target audience, and have become part of daily life in Japan. You can see a picture of an idol on the train, hear ads voiced by them walking to work, see them on the news, television shows, and films. While we, as Americans, may want to compare idols to a Hollywood celebrity or pop star, the comparison would be tentative at best. The biggest difference would be idols' connections with their fan base. Galbraith and Carlin state that, quote, in the Japanese media system, organized around idols, the consumer is positioned as a fan. For the fan consumer, the idol as an object of desire is a fantasy or ideal construct, a mirror reflection which resonates deep affective or emotional meaning, end quote.
The term idol began to be used after the French film In Search of an Idol is screened in Japan in 1963 under the title Idoru Asagasi. This film had a loosely, and perhaps ludicrous, plot that allowed for multiple musical numbers by popular young musicians. While popular musicians weren't new to Japan, the shift from enka singers to youthful, usually women, allowed for the creation of the modern idol. The 70s saw the production of the first wildly successful solo teen idol, Minami Saori, and idols started to commonly appear on television. By the 80s, the idol market had grown large enough to be economically stable, as well as cement their place in Japanese culture going into the bubble economy of the late 80s.
While the bubble economy showcased the idol system at peak efficiency, the post-bubble economy required diversification of idol niches in order to survive the economic decline. Currently, there are a variety of idol types, some of which are mentioned but not all. We have listed a few examples of different idols on this slide, including the virtual idol Hatsune Miku. The idols in Omega Quintet fall into a variety of categories depending on how you decide to cross the uncanny valley, that is, how the player decides to navigate their relationship with the characters therein.
Omega Quintet is classified as an idol simulator and role-playing game. Initially released in 2014, it also has a dating simulator element, and has anime-style cutscenes and paratext. The series tagline, quote, in a world on the verge of destruction, singing might be their only hope, end quote, alludes to the dystopian narrative within. Your main avatar is Takuto, the protagonist of the game. While listening to your childhood friend Otoha practice singing outside, both of you are attacked by monsters. There are some terminology issues with the antagonists called beep or blare in the English translation, as it is defined online as the corruptive fog that changes beings into monsters, also called the MAD or mad. But it also refers to the general phenomena in the narrative of the game, making distinguishing between minions and their masters a little confusing. For this presentation's purposes, we will refer to both as the beep.
The beep have caused the destruction of society as we know it, and now only a scant population remains. Once you are saved by the reigning idol Momoka, your friend is recruited as an idol and you tag along to support her. Takuto is presented as aloof but reliable and becomes part of the idol organization quickly, meeting other recruits and earning a position as a manager for the newest crop of idols, the Omega Quintet. As their group name implies, there are 5 recruits for the position as Savior Idol that was once singly occupied by Momoka. The Omega Quintet meets opposition from their fan base almost immediately. Unforgiving and desperate for hope, the populace presents as many obstacles as the beep for the group to overcome.
Omega Quintet uses a turn-based battle system that incorporates a variety of musical elements. With the exception of Takuto, the other party members use special devices called sound weapons. Each of these weapons can produce harmonic attacks and raise the team's voltage gauge. You enter battle under the assumption that every struggle is televised. And in fact, each battle is narrated by one of the quintet's managers in typical Benshi style, in which each act is flamboyantly described with gusto. Fan support is the main source of power for the idol, or idol group, in charge of defeating the beep. Therefore, when not expressly training at headquarters, battles are considered akin to concerts and are televised accordingly.
Once the battle concert has begun, you can elect to turn on concert mode to receive requests from the fans by activating the voltage gauge. The voltage gauge is essentially a measurement of how well you are doing in battle and audience support, and is needed to perform in concert mode as well as to execute special skills. As the name implies, special skills are powerful, unique attacks that can be performed by one member of the party or in chains if the group has activated harmonics.
If the player is able to manipulate battle order successfully, they can implement group harmonics. If the group and attack order are placed in a certain sequence, a powerful harmonic attack can be used called a harmonic chain. Let's take a look at an example of a battle from the US pre-release demo. Now that we have a baseline for what concert battles are like, we can move on with additional analysis from Omega Quintet.
Omega Quintet follows a more literal weaponization of music. The overall antagonist in Omega Quintet is the beep, which are miasmic clouds that corrupt normal humans and animals to create monsters. The quintet utilizes musical tools in physical combat with the beep, and then they have to sing in order to fully destroy the beep.
The fact that the enemy is called the beep has extra baggage as well. Beep is an oft-used sound effect in Japanese animated media representing white noise or a mechanical sound effect. This provides an underlying symbolism between the acoustic music of the quintet in opposition with white noise or mechanical music of the beep. In this sense, artificial music has ruined the world in Omega Quintet, and humanity's only hope is the music of idols.
As we explained in the previous slide, the correlation of music as a weapon is literal, especially on the surface level. However, there are several themes that allow for the comparison of Omega Quintet as an allegory for commodification. There are two antagonists in Omega Quintet, the beep and the fans. From the beginning of the narrative, the quintet struggles with audience approval, which then directly affects their power. As replacements for the previous commodity, Momoka, the quintet is told bluntly that they cannot compare. However, given the self-perpetuating cycle of goods, i.e. the idols, to their consumer base, i.e. the fans, and the reduction of the market, i.e. the post-apocalyptic setting, it is no wonder that changing from one idol system to the next would cause disruption.
On the narrative surface, it would seem that Omega Quintet is a story of struggle and hope. In fact, this dichotomy permeates through all levels of the game. The quintet is full of independent characters that possess both physical and mental strength, but they are constantly tested. Their resulting struggles give the appearance of weakness, their independence stripped at two levels: in the agency, as they are trained to be saviors, and in the outside world, where their power is part of a codependent relationship with their consumers, which are shown to be only men in the game. In order to grow as both idols and soldiers, they attempt to garner approval via concerts, both literal and in a battle setting. This relationship is amplified as the player controls their promotional videos, their strength level, costumes, and extending past the uncanny valley, there are literal records to buy the performances of the quintet. In effect, the player controls the quintet's digital and real life.
The over-the-top narrative in Omega Quintet may seem too convoluted to have any bearing on reality, but the quintet represents the change from the old type of idol to a new generation, and therefore a new hope for humanity and their market. Look at this comparison between the Omega Quintet and AKB48. The video game recording was made at random, without any intent in creating a similar effect to the AKB48 music video. The parallels between the two groups are amusing, but also highlight the intensely structured manufacturing of idols, digital or otherwise.
One of the most striking themes for Omega Quintet is the series of dualities. The quintet is portrayed as strong but fragile, beautiful but capable of brutality, artists but soldiers. The message could almost be mistaken for feminist, as these traits are present in all women, and one of the potential effects of ending sexist oppression would be the freedom of expression without prescribed gender, social, or economic roles. But instead the quintet is tied to male approval and smothered in the male gaze.
For further example, while we only mention the quintet's costumes in passing, the player can choose their outfits, down to their underwear, and how they want to enforce or maintain them. The game requires stringent leveling, especially if the player wants to be able to get the best ending. As a quintet takes damage in battle, their clothing becomes ripped and falls off. Eventually, the player will end up training the quintet in only their underwear to conserve materials and currency. Mari Katani's research gives another term for this type: battling beauties. While the term was coined by psychiatrist Saito Tamaki, Katani further theorizes that, quote, while ordinary girls are frequently seen as incapable of fighting and thus as nothing more than inanimate things, the battling beauty proves as aggressive as any boy. Yet she does not seem to hold out any hope or desire for liberation. The battling beauty is a beauty, which configures her in relation to boys' desires. Thus, she may function as a mirror of boys' desires for their liberation. End quote.
Like flesh and blood idols, they are at the mercy of their manager and their fans, representing someone to connect to, but up on a pedestal. In fact, digital idols present another layer of patriarchal capitalist control, as even their voices and actions are not their own. Kaya Silverman explains the importance of a woman's voice thusly, quote, the female voice is as relentlessly held to normative representation and functions as is the female body. End quote. The character Otoha exemplifies this situation. Early in the game, Otoha is touted as the weakest singer as well as the most inconsistent fighter in the quintet. Her loss of voice is directly tied to her loss of power. Her lack of confidence is used to mold her into a product of the management's choosing, replacing her innate ability with a manufactured one. While Otoha does eventually gain confidence, it comes with the initial erasure of self.
It is at this time that we would like to bring up a point about the possibility of sexist oppression ending after the fall of society. While Omega Quintet exists post-fall of society as we know it, the patriarchy persists both inside the narrative and outside in reality. Bell Hooks explains this by stating that, quote, the positive impact of liberal reforms on women's lives should not lead to the assumption that they eradicate systems of domination, end quote. Christoph Thuni's analysis of Miyadi Shinji's concept of a never-ending everyday explains that, quote, the apocalypse has become the imperative to reproduce the social structure at the very level of everyday life. The everyday is now the critical moment, end quote. For Omega Quintet, this means that even though there was a dissolution of modern society, the patriarchy persists because man's consumption habits are tied to the never-ending everyday.
This brings us back to the theme of dualities. Omega Quintet presents a plethora of polarities. The music is used for entertainment as well as a weapon. The characters are presented as normal women and performers, but also saviors. The intertextual comparisons can be found on every level of analysis and range from overt to subtle. On the surface, Omega Quintet seems like a standard dating sim in JRPG, but the way the game tells this story and the amount of control the player has over the fates of these characters makes the game original and complex. Effective use of weaponization occurs at each of these polarities. The music is literally weaponized and used as a promotional tool, or market weaponization. The quintet's bodies and voices are weaponized in this never-ending everyday with borderline abusive relationships. The consumers are weaponized to support the quintet, and we in turn are weaponized to support this narrative.
Omega Quintet has a variety of possible research opportunities, as mentioned in the previous slide. We also believe that the parallels presented in both our conclusions and the earlier video leave room for future research comparing the quintet to AKB48 and Momoka to the perpetual teen idol Minorisari. We would also like to compare Omega Quintet to other idol simulator games. There are, of course, other problematic aspects to Omega Quintet that we choose not to address in this presentation due to time constraints and lack of cultural knowledge. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, and we are looking forward to your questions.